Hello.
My name is Chinazora Zubike, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker. Dr. Langston Clark is an assistant professor at the University of Texas at San Antonio in the Department of Kinesiology, Health, and Nutrition, and an affiliate with the African American Studies program. Dr. Clark completed his PhD in curriculum and instruction with a concentration in physical education, teacher education at the University of Texas at Austin. Prior to obtaining his PhD, he received his Master of Arts in Adapted Physical Education from The Ohio State University and a Bachelor of Science in Physical Education from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. Given his experience as an undergrad at A&T and HBCU, he has developed a passion for the continued development and elevation of minority-serving institutions. Dr. Clark's research focuses on the training of teachers of color within HBCUs from the perspective of physical education teacher education. More broadly, he explores social justice as a cultural manifestation within HBCUs. His other research interests include the intersection of athletics, race, and education. Some of his recent and forthcoming publications can be found in the Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sport, Journal of Black Psychology, Journal of Teaching and Physical Education, the Journal of Negro Education, Quest and the Teacher Educator. Furthermore, Langston has made numerous presentations surrounding issues of social justice at a variety of national and regional conferences. Pedagogically, he's interested in the preparation and development of teacher education of students of color. Please welcome Dr. Langston Clark.
Thank you for that introduction. So, first I have to go with the cliche. When I say Aggie, you say pride. So it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you all for coming. I have to thank A&T, my alma mater, my beloved alma mater. I have to thank God. I have to thank my family. I want to thank the faculty and staff who put this together. Most importantly, the students who are here in attendance today. I have a special shout out that I want to give to Ayana Boyd Allen and Ms. Sharon Horde, because it was a few months ago, maybe almost 10 months ago or so, that we, Dr. Morton and I, who will be speaking later on, sent an email about sort of developing an opportunity for those of us who are in the academy, who are scientists and scholars spread throughout the country, as early career scholars, and those of us who are still in programs, to come back and have conversations with people who are still here at A&T to talk about what it means to be a graduate student and how we can progress and sort of build social capital among ourselves so that we can be a benefit not only to A&T as an institution, but to fellow Aggies across the country. So special thanks to everyone who helped put this together. Today I'm going to talk about my journey from A&T to PhD and the importance of recognizing the joy that comes with being a graduate student. And the reason for this is because so much of what you hear about going through the process of getting a PhD can be negative. So anything from the conversations about comprehensive exams being difficult, but it's supposed to be like this really outstanding milestone that you got to. But as soon as you get there, everybody's like, oh, you got comps coming up? My comps were super hard. It was very difficult. I'll never forget how hard it was. Or maybe even you got that pilot study that you did, and it didn't necessarily get the results that you expected, but that's just part of the process, right? Because it's science and it's scholarship, and you don't always get the result that you expected at first. So sometimes it's important that we remember that these studies that didn't get the results that we wanted is just part of the process. And then you get to the dissertation proposal, and you're thinking everything's going to be gravy because you spent so much work on this dissertation proposal, but when you got it up to your committee, everybody said that you needed major revisions. And you're like, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I'm not even at the dissertation study yet. It's just a proposal, and I still have major revisions. And then you get to the point where you're writing your dissertation and you're communicating with other faculty. Maybe you have friends from undergrad, maybe you have friends who are in the program now who are further along than you are, and they just talk about how hard writing the dissertation is and how isolating that it can be. So I just want to remind you that all of that is part of the process and that you can still find joy in your graduate education. I'll never forget when I got to Ohio State for my master's degree. And, you know, I was just excited to be at a big white school, you know. I was. I mean, their football stadium was bigger than our entire campus, it seemed like. They have a medical school that looks like a city within the campus. It's like the city of Greensboro placed within the Ohio State. So I was just blown away that I could go from A&T to being at a place like that. And so what I saw from the students there were they had their hair falling out. And I was imagining they weren't going bald because of some male pattern baldness. Like these were women, right? And their hair was falling out. And what's interesting, it was that these were white and Asian students who stereotypically are supposed to have no issues in grad school. But the stresses and the pressures that they were under being in that situation just made it seem like a dreadful experience. But at the same time, some of these students were actually really good students and doing well, but they weren't necessarily enjoying the process. And I'll never forget one of my mentors, who was a PhD student at the time, who's a brother. He actually went to South Carolina State. I won't hate on him for that because he looked out for me. And I'll never forget him telling me, he said, Langston, if I could go back, I wouldn't get a PhD. And so I decided that when it was my turn to get my PhD, that I wasn't going to allow my experience to be like that. Because it doesn't have to be this dreadful experience. So there's three major points, that I want to hit on today related to recognizing the joy of graduate education. And the first one is remembering, then we have reframing, and then we have relating. Remember when you first told everyone in your family that you were getting a PhD? Y'all remember that? What was it like? Not a rhetorical question. You said something.
Excitement.
It was excitement, right? Everyone was bragging about how their baby was getting a PhD. Everybody, like even like that honor uncle that may not like you as much, they still bragging about you getting a PhD. Like all of a sudden you became everybody's favorite family member, and friends that aren't necessarily your best friend started saying you were their best friend. Oh, my best friend from undergrad, y'all might have just been roommates freshman year, y'all stopped talking after that. Now you're their best friend, right? It's getting a PhD. And they were already calling you doctor, whatever your last name is, before you walked across the stage and got hooded. And it was like the best experience. I remember getting my acceptance letter into Texas, because that's where I got my PhD, or even my acceptance letter into Ohio State where I got my master's degree. And it's like this high that gets you up here, but then you fast forward and you've been in school an extra 5 years. And everybody's nagging you about how much longer you're going to be in school. But on the flip side of things, you're doing very well in terms of your progress towards your degree and your career development. And these are the same people who are liking all of your social media pictures because you got some award for being an outstanding graduate student. Or maybe you did your first presentation at a national conference. Or maybe you got your first publication. So in some ways, while they don't understand the process, they still appreciate the fact that you're making this progress. And so that's something to remember, that everyone who's on the outside may not understand what you're going through, but in some ways, they still understand and they still love you while you're doing it. But then you see them in person, those people who are liking your social media presence, and sometimes they treat you like you're someone who's taking 15 years to complete your undergraduate degree. Like it's not like you're still finishing your bachelor's, right? It takes a little bit longer to get through your PhD. And they act like they didn't know ahead of time it was going to take you a few extra years. Then there are those people who aren't as educated as you are, who will sometimes inadvertently make you feel like you're inferior because you're getting a PhD. These are the people who are constantly trying to fact check you, or the ones who are bothered because you might actually know something. There's a beautiful thing about being a graduate student because you just don't learn about your major or your area of interest. I never learned about, like, my major is the furthest thing from like mental health issues. But because so many graduate students go through it, these are the types of conversations that we would be having in graduate school. So when we talk about depression in an academic setting, like I'm able to take that to people in my family and be like, you might need to go see a counselor. Because these are the conversations that I never got exposed to before I got into academia, so to speak. And so they just looking at you saying, you don't know what you're talking about. All you got is theory because you've been in that academic world and you don't know what's really going on. It's almost like the people who know that you're getting this outstanding education are trying to convince you that the world is flat and that climate change isn't real. And then there's always the comment about how you don't have a real job, right? And maybe they just don't understand that, like, you're basically an indentured servant. True, you work more than 40 hours, you know, because you got to do your advisor's research project and you got a different research interest, so you got to do your work and their work. And if you're the type of person who lifts as you climb, you might be trying to mentor some undergraduate students too. But they don't see it as work because you may not be getting paid like you would if you were out on the market. And now you're at the point where, as proud as they may be, friends, family, or whoever seemed to be the most excited about your pursuit of graduate education when you first told them about it years ago, now seem to be a little bit more cooled off. And now is the time, because maybe you're at the point where you're preparing for a dissertation proposal or a pilot study, you need them to have that excitement so that they could be the silver lining in your cloudy days. And so I think back on my own experiences and how you get to that point where you might want to quit. You may not feel like people on the outside understand what you're going through, but you told everyone in your family that you're getting a PhD. So you can't quit now. Because the expectation has been set that you're going to complete the process and you're going to get through. And they're already calling you doctor. So when times got hard for me, I took it as an opportunity to remember how I got to where I was. See, I didn't go to A&T at a time when we were talking about preeminence. It was an open access school when I was here. And so I don't even know if I would have gotten into the modern day A&T. My high school GPA was a 2.3. And I'll never forget how in 2002, Ohio State had just won the national championship. I graduated high school in 2003. So I was like, I want to go to Ohio State, but I didn't have a GPA for it. So my guidance counselor was like, nah. And then my mother told me, Langston, you need to go to A&T because that's where your sister went. And so I wound up going to A&T. Little did I know that here, my advisor, Dr. Webb, went to Ohio State for his master's degree. And so when it was time for me to think about going to graduate school, Dr. Webb said, if you want to study anything dealing with sport or physical activity, you should go to Ohio State. So I wound up going to Ohio State because I had a great interaction with Dr. Webb. And at the time, I didn't even make the connection that I had wanted to go to Ohio State for a moment just because they had won the national championship, and that things had come full circle through my interactions with my faculty members, with my professors here at A&T. So I go to Ohio State, but while I was applying for master's programs, I also looked at the University of Texas at Austin. So I didn't know anything about UT. I just know that it was a big white school, and they had different colors, burnt orange, okay? So I called up there and I asked them what I need to get into their sport management program, and somebody told me some crazy number that I needed to have on my Jerry score back then. And I was like, my score is not that high, so I didn't even apply. So I go to Ohio State. I have a mentor there. His wife, who also has a PhD, happened to go to A&T. And I wound up not getting to Ohio State for a PhD because of politics, but they wound up sending me to go to Texas to get my PhD. And so in the midst of things like seeming really difficult, like when you look back, sometimes you got to trace the steps that you took to get to where you are. Because everything works out in due time, and it's all part of the process. So remembering is the first key to recognizing the joy of graduate education. Reframing is the second piece I want to talk about. Don't fall for the comparison trap. You're getting a PhD in STEM, but your friends are already making a six-figure salary. Right? Y'all know. You have every good reason to quit right now and go work in industries. But you can't. You might have a family, you might have your own kids, or you might have family members' kids that need help and money and support. And that six-figure salary is looking real nice. And you're doing your work, your advisor's work, and you mentoring undergraduate students, and you're not getting paid extra for it. You're getting this PhD, but your friends are on the Great Wall of China taking selfies or some other exotic place that you could be visiting. It's a blessing that you got funding for your graduate studies. Well, maybe you might not have funding. Either way, the interest from your student loans as an undergrad is still accruing. So that's something you gotta worry about. This is on top of the financial sacrifices that you're making just being a graduate student. Maybe right now it doesn't seem like it's worth it to get a PhD. But I want to ask you to reframe the situation and think that maybe you're rich. Because what you have now are investments in intellectual capital, social capital, and university capital. From the perspective of intellectual capital, not only will you leave here with the unique knowledge and skills, you will leave here with the ability to increase those knowledge and skills once you're done. Don't get it twisted. The title matters, but it's not the most important thing. You might have heard this before. You can't just be getting this PhD because you want to be called doctor. Because when you leave here, you will have unique abilities and ways of thinking that others won't have. Social capital. So I recently submitted a publication about my other fathers. And those are my three mentors that I had here as an undergraduate student at my master's program, and then also as a PhD student. And so when I talk about my journey from A&T to PhD, what it afforded me was the opportunity to increase my social capital such that I have a broad network of mentors and mentees throughout the country who pour into me whenever I need it. And so I would say don't even seek to build a network, but rather think about building a community, dare I say family of scholars and scientists that you can lean on for social support, authentic love, and career advice. networking seems like a term where it's just like I can do for you and you can do for me. I know Marcus Kroon, who's sitting in the front, Dr. Terrell Morton, and Brandon Kroon's over there, just because we saw each other at a conference one day and we just said, what's up? And now I can call Marcus about some struggles that I'm having being on the tenure track, and we'll talk about God, we'll talk about the future, we'll write a publication together, and we don't even have the same research interests, but we just make it work. I'll talk about Terrell, we're talking about coming back to A&T and taking over. We might want your job one day. You know? And these aren't people that I met during my time here at A&T. But the fact that we all were able to matriculate through the process, we met each other somewhere down the road. I have more friendships from A&T because I decided to go to grad school and finish than I do from just being an undergraduate student. And this was before the whole preeminence thing. So when I was here, it was a great social time. We were still a party school. Like, this was GHO before GHO. Like, what y'all think is GHO, the greatest homecoming on earth? Like, the hashtag, like, when it was the whole word, like the whole sentence, that's when it was really GHO. Okay? Because y'all don't party the same as we used to. Okay? Take the time to invest in relationships because you're going to need people to pour into you. I learned how to be a graduate student not from my professors, but from those graduate students who were more senior than I was. So when I got to Ohio State, the same brother who was like Langston, if I could go back and get a PhD, I wouldn't do it. Even though he was having a miserable time, he was the person that made it enjoyable for me, because he taught me the ins and outs of being a graduate student. When you get in this class with this professor, make sure you talk, because if you don't, they're going to think you're stupid. When you get in this class with this professor, talk, but don't be too challenging because they'll be threatened by you. Or I'll never forget the time when it was me, Frankie, who's a black man, and Carlos, who is a Latino male. We're in this one professor's class, and he pulled him to the side, and he said, I think you two should drop one of my classes, because my classes are really rigorous, and you shouldn't take both of them at the same time. So essentially what he was doing was, for the black student and Latino student, he was lowering the expectations, because he didn't tell anybody else that. So these are the stories and the information that I get from those graduate students who are more senior than I am about how to navigate graduate school. So while it might seem like you're broke right now, the gains that you're getting in intellectual capital and social capital are tremendous. And the last form of capital I want to talk about is university capital. You can't just be getting a PhD in your major. You've got to major in being a PhD student. And what that means is learning how to leverage the university to get the things that you want that other people aren't thinking out, that other people aren't seeking out. How can you make A&T look good by creating the dream graduate experience for yourself? So your homeboy or your homegirl that's taking selfies on the Great Wall of China, or they're going to some island, right, that you don't know how to pronounce the name of. Like, how can you get A&T to do that for you and still benefit as a graduate student? There's always more money, even though they say there's budget cuts. One way to get money is to seek out fellowships or grants. There's always more opportunities, even though they may not be painted out there for you up front. Remember that all of the things that you're missing out on, you can still accomplish in school. So I'll use my friend Brandon Kroon as an example. He may talk about this a little bit later. In the program that he's in at the University of Texas, he's been to like 4 or 5 different countries. And what that does is, it makes UT look good because they're giving him research and presentation experiences around the world. And if that's not something that A&T has yet, write the proposal and just see what happens. And the last part, which I think is most important, is relating. Getting a PhD is about the enhancement of your identity and not the loss of your identity. How many of y'all went to an HBCU for undergrad? Most of you, okay. Y'all on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, right? Yes, no? Okay, some of y'all. So, for those of you who are into social media, you've seen the meme where it says your freshman year at HBCU and your senior year at HBCU, right? And it goes from, y'all know Lorenz Tate? Right? So, the current one is Lorenz Tate from Menace to Society. And then you have Lorenz Tate on Power, who's like the alderman or whatever, right? He's working for the city government, running for mayor. And they have the comparisons. And I'm thinking about, like, what happens if that process continues? Just imagine if from freshman year you could go from saggy pants and a wife beater to senior year wearing a suit with a bow tie, and then you get your master's degree, and then you get your PhD. Don't get so lost in the sauce of graduate school that you're trying to fit into with the image of what a scholar or scientist is supposed to be. You don't have to wear the bow tie or the suit jacket with the patches with the leather briefcase to be that person. You can still be you. You can still dress the way you dress. You can still talk the way you talk and be the best scholar or scientist in the room. If Einstein can let his hair grow up and out, so can you. The more you look the part, the more you try to look the part or talk the part so that you can fit in, the more you'll feel like you don't belong. And that's when you start to lose the joy. In essence, what I'm saying is don't lose the ability to relate to yourself as you go through the process. You also don't want to lose the ability to relate to others. So make sure that you're still connecting with people who only have bachelor's degrees. Or maybe some people who don't have degrees at all. Even though you might be in the toughest, most arduous time of your graduate program, don't forget to go to the family reunion. You've got all this work to do, and it seems like you don't have the time. But in some instances, there are diminishing returns without going back to those groups of people who are just regular and don't have the titles. While you're in school, take time to relate to your peers. Who says that graduate school can't be just as fun or more fun than undergrad? In fact, if you were a nerd in undergrad and you didn't do anything, this is your last chance to have some fun. And you don't have to feel guilty about it, because if you do it with your peers, you know that at the end of the day, everyone else is still going to be committed to getting their work done. Celebrate every step of the process. So earlier I talked about how you have your dissertation proposal coming up, or you got your pilot study, or you're doing your comprehensive exams, right? When you've got your lit review done, make sure you put the lit in lit review and celebrate afterwards.
That's good. That's good. I like that.
Okay? Remind yourself that this process is tough, it's rough, and it's hard, but every step of the process, there's an opportunity to celebrate you being here, because there are other people who don't have the opportunity or chose another path, and they're still not getting what you're getting. The most important thing about relating is that it helps you remember that you aren't doing this for the academy. This endeavor is about more than institutions, publications, grant applications, or preparing for tenure or even promotion. This is about developing yourself, becoming more of who you are, staying connected to your community, and understanding that this doesn't have to be the type of process that breaks you down, because it's supposed to build you up and make you better. So as a quick recap, the 3 keys that I see for making your journey from A&T to PhD an enjoyable process is remembering, reframing, and relating. Thank you.